I was working in the Division of Gems and Minerals, and I think we all know that the Smithsonian has amazing gems and minerals, right? And I was at my desk one day when the guy who was the director of that came up and said, "Would you like to see the Hope Diamond?" It's one of the most famous diamonds in the world. It's a very large blue diamond, and it has a history of cursing anybody that's ever owned it. Not anybody that's worn it, but anybody that's owned it. It's normally on display in the Smithsonian, but they were bringing it under armed guard into the Gem and Minerals section to photograph it. And he said, "Do you want to see it?" And I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Do you want to wear it?" And I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Do you want a photo of you with it on?" So I do have this photo of me, a little 25-year-old scientist wearing the Hope Diamond. So I'm Dr. Katherine Romanak. I'm a research professor at the Bureau of Economic Geology at the University of Texas at Austin. And I am an environmental geochemist, and I work on carbon capture and geologic storage. I knew I wanted to be a geologist ever since I was 13 years old. I know I'm really lucky because not a lot of people know what they want to do when they're 13 years old. But what happened was I was in this test, and the proctor said, "So if I see anyone talking, I'm going to take your papers, put them in the trash can, and you're going to get a 0. And at that very moment, my best friend leaned over to me and said, "What did she say?" And the proctor immediately said, "You too, papers in the trash can, you get a 0. And little did I know that that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I got held back in science, and the holding class was geology. And I remember reading my geology textbook one night and reading about how sediments get shed off of mountains and they get deposited in these deep ocean basins, and then plate tectonics crushes them together and makes new mountain ranges. And I thought, oh my gosh, the earth is not solid underneath us. It's a moving, living thing. And that is when I just became interested. And then I went into the little library and I looked at the book that said geologist, and I saw a photo of a man on a mountain with a scope. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing that. So I went to SMU, got my undergraduate, and decided then that volcanoes were the things that I was really interested in. And I got a couple of internships to go out in the field with students that were doing, volcanic theses and things like that. And I was just sold. So I then did my master's at the University of Texas at Arlington. And then I got a job at the Smithsonian Institution's Global Volcanism Program in Washington, D.C. And this was really neat. But what you have to realize is in those days, like the way there wasn't internet, there was fax and phone. And so my job was to receive reports from volcanologists all around the world who were at the top of volcanoes. And then these reports would come into me, I would put them together, and then we would mail it out. And this was real-time reporting on volcanic activity. And after a couple of years, I thought, you know what? I don't want to be the one behind the desk. I want to be the one on the volcano, sending the reports. And I thought, okay, I'm going to quit my job at the Smithsonian. My husband and I are going to take a trip around the country. I'm going to look at PhD programs. He's going to look for jobs. So it was looking a lot like we were going to be going to Austin, but there was only one problem. Austin doesn't have active volcanoes. And I was really hoping I'd end up in the Cascade Range, where there was active volcanoes. And unfortunately, during this time, 4 of my colleagues were killed in 2 separate volcanic eruptions. And I started thinking, I'm in Texas, I'm about to be married, maybe these things are kind of dangerous, maybe I want to rethink what I'm going to do. I do remember sitting at my desk one day and thinking, gosh, I just want to make a difference with my science. And then hearing that voice say, who are you to do that? You'll never do that. You're not good enough. You're not important enough to do that. And then I remember just saying to myself, you know what? That's not my job. My job is to trust and to ask. And then I just left it at the door. And so at that moment, I had been a geochemist, and I just looked up on the board and I looked and I saw, who's a geochemist? I found a name, Aqueous Geochemistry, Phil Bennett at the University of Texas at Austin, and I went into his office and I we immediately hit it off, and he had this amazing project in West Texas looking at environmental geochemistry. And so at that time is when I completely switched from volcanology to environmental geochemistry. It was a big change for me because, I had a lot of my identity rolled into being a volcanologist. I'd go to a cocktail party and somebody would say, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "I study volcanoes," and they would be impressed. And then when I would go to a cocktail party and say I'm an environmental geochemist, most of these people would be like, they didn't understand and they wouldn't really, it wasn't that sexy, right? But what I did learn is that science is science, and I love working with data. I love being out in the field. I love having the choice of being out in the field sometimes, behind the desk writing a report other times, and then going to conferences and then communicating those results. And so I just realized that it was wonderful. Getting my PhD took me a very long time. 6 years and 2 babies, because I got my PhD 2 weeks before the birth of my second son. And then I was a mom for 10 years. So I was doing that mom thing. One night my husband said, "Well, the kids are older now. You love science. Why don't you get back into geology?" And I made 3 phone calls the next day, and I landed my dream job at the Bureau of Economic Geology. And there was this thing called carbon capture and geologic storage. And I didn't know what it was, but they were looking for people with my experience and expertise in the environmental monitoring to start studying what happens to the CO2 when we put it deep in the ground. What would happen if it got into drinking water? Would it leak? What would be the environmental impacts if it did come to the surface? And also, how could we monitor it? How would we know if it came to the surface or not? And so, lo and behold, what I did for my PhD in the Playas was directly applicable to this carbon capture and geologic sequestration. Now, after 20 years of researching the safety and environmental impacts of carbon capture and storage, I can definitely tell you that it's extremely safe and that it's a worthwhile thing that we should be doing. A lot of people don't understand it. Carbon capture and storage is stopping or mitigating global warming by reducing the amount of carbon dioxide that is emitted into the atmosphere from large industrial point sources. So any industry with a flue stack that spews out gases, waste gases, CO2 into the atmosphere, we need to put a capture unit on that stack, scrub out the carbon dioxide, compress it into a liquid, and then inject it deep in the earth for long-term disposal. The environmental aspects of this really I see as the interface between the public and the project, because what the public cares about is safety and environmental protection. So now I am doing a lot of outreach and helping people to understand this technology, because it's a large, complex technology and it needs to be deployed now, okay? But it's very difficult because a lot of people don't understand it. They're nervous, and so what I do now is try to really help people understand that so that they can support it, because it's very important. So I never could have predicted that, but I'm really happy that the circuitous route that I took led me to where I am today. Because I travel the world, I'm informing policy in some of the highest policy venues, such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And I feel like I'm having a real impact with my science, which is something I really was asking for. In my heart, when I was in grad school, I really wanted to make an impact. At one point, when I got my PhD and I had 2 young children and I really wanted to focus on them, and it was a choice that I made to focus on those kids. At one point I thought, wow, I might not ever become a geologist, which is what my dream was. I might not ever get that dream. But I said, it doesn't matter, because I have had such a good time being a geologist, like going on field trips, traveling, camping, and the bonds that you make with people in geology. I don't know, I think it's just really special, because, and I think it might be because we go out in the field together, But I really do consider my colleagues as my extended family. I mean, I've never met a geologist I don't like. So there you go.
Thanks for watching Meet a Geoscientist, a series by the Bureau of Economic Geology. For more information on this topic, check out the links in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, like and subscribe to discover more career paths in geoscience.